on YouTube. I've had a few conversations recently about minds and brains, and you know, they tend to very quickly devolve down into people saying that minds and brains are the same thing, that it's all just neurons, that it's just computation, these kind of things. And I can see why people would say that, because as far as we know, I don't think there's any much doubt about this, that minds and brains, of course, are supervenient upon one another. You know, without the brain you don't get mind. I know there's other people who think differently. There are people who are panpsychists who think that mind is a function of the universe and all those kinds of things. I personally don't. But you know, even if you do think that, I think you'd have to admit that brains are pretty important. You know, even if mind is something like a radio signal being broadcast through the universe, you still need the receiver, don't you? So brains are clearly a really significant part of that. But I don't think they're not the same thing. You know, minds and brains aren't the same thing. You know, personally, I think that minds are something that brains do. But even if you think something radically different, I think you'd have to accept that the brain is a really important link in that chain of whatever it is. But they're not, as I said, but brain activity isn't the same as mental activity. In the same way that you know, a pain isn't the same thing as the you know, as the nerve activity that's happening, or the neuronal firing that corresponds to that pain. There's the physical event, and then there's the phenomenology of it, isn't it? The experiencing of it. And mind is the experiencing of this stuff, it seems to me, or something like that. You know, they're certainly not coterminous ideas. And I think I think minds not only are different to the point where I don't think you can say not only is it not the same thing, it's not even the kind of thing. You know, mind is much closer to a verb than a noun. I know we use mind as if it's a noun, as if it's a thing, but it clearly isn't, I don't think. It is something that's a process, it's something that's happening. In the same way we use the term like movement as if it's a thing, but of course movement is an event, isn't it? But what are the components of mind? You know, we know what components of brains are pretty much. They're all those neuronal assemblies and so on, and those neurotransmitters and the connections that exist between synapses, all those kind of things is what brains are. But is that the same? But what's mind made of? Because I don't think it's even necessarily the case to say that mind is computation. You know, it's the computation that those neuronal assemblies, those synapses, those connections take part in. I'm sure they do computation, or something like it, but that's not mind either, is it? So you can't say that mind is expressible in the language of computation. You know, so it's not neurons. It's not the machine code of computation produced by those neuronal assemblies. What is this mind thing? And I think that personally, this is just my opinion, I think mind is made up of ideas. I think that's the vocabulary of mind, is ideas, concepts. And some of those ideas are generated, probably all those ideas in some way, but primarily I'd say those ideas are generated by the body and the sensory engagement that the body has with the world. So all these experiences that my body and my sensory organs are giving me right now in relationship to the world, the things I'm seeing and the feel that are laying under my feet, and the sound of those birds in my ears, all these experiences that I'm having are ideas, concepts that are being formed, presumably through the processes of that brain and through the computational engagement that's coming out of those physical processes. But it is being turned into this wine of experience. And those are some of the ideas, but also the ideas that I'm building out of those ideas. You know, because we can build ideas out of ideas, can't we? We can run concepts together. We can confuse them in the literal meaning of that sense. Confusing meanings kind of flow together. And I think we flow together a lot of our ideas to generate new ideas. What are sometimes called conceptual blends in in language theory, conceptual blends, when you take ideas, metaphorical ideas, figurative ideas, and run them together to generate new concepts, where we mix metaphors, which we do the whole time, not just consciously in our language, but non-consciously. A lot of the stuff that's happening in the backstage area of our minds right now, in our brains, is that strange computational process whereby metaphors are mixing and blending and presenting themselves in covert form as thoughts. Engines of inquiry, I've heard them described, of mixed metaphors as engines of inquiry. A lot of the creative capacity we have as human beings is because of this covert, in the dark, non-conscious mixing of figurations and blending of ideas and concepts backstage. So some of these ideas are generated by the body, some of these ideas are generated by the confusion, the healthy confusion of the ideas and the construction of ideas out of other ideas, and some of them just seem to be dreamed up. Actually, dreams is a good example, because dreams are often where those confusions of ideas come to the fore, don't they? You know, it's almost like we're just glancing behind us to see what, well, this is what our ideas are made of. It's made out of all that blending stuff, and there it is, presented to us. But then there's these ideas we just make up, you know, ideas like God, ideas like races, ideas like souls, ideas in philosophy, ideas in religion, ideas in art, but also ideas in science. You know, when Richard Dawkins talks about science being the poetry of reality, it's a smart thing to say that, you know. I would put it the other way around personally and say reality is the poetry of science, but that's academic in a sense. He's recognising, you know, because poetry is a lot of poetry in art is about confusion and about surfacing those dreamlike confusions that power our thinking, for good or ill, and some of those are realisable as scientific theories. You know, there isn't really a river out of Eden that Dawkins talks about. It's a metaphorical construct, but it has so much explanatory power that as an idea, once you've got that as an idea, or Mount Improbable, or the Blind Watchmaker, all the other ideas that he generates, metaphorical, figurative confusions, healthy confusions which have explanatory power, then it just helps you think, you know, in a particular way. And in that case it's the science, poetry of reality way. But sometimes we need to think in other ways, you know. Sometimes we need to think in ways which take things apart and destroy things and undermine reality and do all that stuff, don't we? Anyway, yeah, so minds, brains. Just recap. Minds are not the same thing as brains. The stuff that minds are made of is not the stuff that brains are made of. And the stuff that minds are made of are things like ideas, ideas about ideas, ideas built on the back of ideas, and confusion, endless healthy confusion.